It's not really the test itself, the 11 plus test itself, that I object to. It's really a whole apparatus around it. So if I think back to when I did the 11 plus, basically the whole of my last year at primary school, what we used to call the fourth year juniors, was completely dominated by this test. So it changed the curriculum, it dominated the curriculum, but it narrowed the curriculum down to what was required in the test, which was in those days practical and mental arithmetic, English and intelligence, a verbal reasoning test. So basically we spent the whole year just doing that. So a whole rest of activity which we might think very desirable, very useful for 10 and 11-year-olds to be doing was almost entirely dispensed, whether it was physical work, creative work, whether it was cooperative work between us. But there are other aspects to this as well, that because it's a competitive exam, let's not forget that, it's a competitive exam, it's about and it's dominated by the idea of how I am related to the person who I might imagine is above me or below me. Now, how was that exemplified when I was at school? I'll tell you, the teacher used to stand in the middle of the room and say, all of you on this side of the room are going to pass. Then she'd rotate 180 degrees and go, all of you on that side of the room are going to fail. How did she know? Because we were being tested all the time. Part of the whole rehearsing for the 11 plus is to test and test and test. You get the results, she aggregated the results, and we were put in our positions in the class according to the test results. And then she then could discriminate between us in a form of setting, if you like. Half the class pass, half the class fail. Meanwhile, the other class, because there was a B class as well, they were all going to fail. So all this, so it wasn't just the nature of the test itself, it was how it came to dominate that year. Now, nowadays things may have changed slightly, may not be exactly the same as that, but I know from places like Kent that the whole of that year is dominated by private tuition. So a lot of it has been, if you like, outsourced. So though maybe schools are not doing a fanatical preparation, though some are, some aren't, but all that means is that, of course, the 11 plus exam, the domination of it has been outsourced privately, and it sets child against child, family against family, school against school, and so people are caught up in this whirlwind of trying to get into the grammar. This is like, excuse me, the most important thing that'll happen in these children's lives. This is what they are told and what we were told. Well, there's an irony, isn't it, that we say that the great thing about 11 plus exam is it's fair. But one thing it isn't fair. It's actually, as some people have observed, it's actually a test as to how much financial ability you have to hire a tutor. That the more tutors you hire, the better tutors you hire, the more chance you have of passing the exam. So this great exam that was brought in, first of all in this country in 1944, on the grounds that it was fair, you know, that people didn't bring it in for bad reasons, let that be said. They thought that this was a fair way to assess children's potential. They thought it was a good way to predict whether children could benefit from the grammar school or whether they would benefit from what they claimed was an equal but different education, which was practical. So they claimed it was fair, but in actual fact it's now even less fair than it was then, and goodness knows there were all sorts of built-in unfairnesses in the exam then. Like, for example, I was very good at English and rubbish at maths. You had to be good at both. I was borderline, therefore pass. I got very anxious, I got worried, and I said to my mum, I don't think I'm going to pass, I'm no good at maths. My mum was a teacher. She went up to the school, she asked the head whether I was going to pass. He said yes. How did he know? Because he gave what was called the head teacher's recommendation. So there were a lot of borderline people, and it was decided for the likes of me, and I don't know whether I was somebody who actually failed his maths but got in on head teacher's recommendation, but I remember there was a girl in our class who heard on the day of when we received our little letters telling us whether we'd passed or failed, that she had failed. What school did she go to? The grammar school, because she got the head teacher's recommendation. Jolly good, nice for her, she was a very bright girl. But the point was, that was one aspect, it was rigged. The other, it was rigged as far as boys and girls. There was not a 50% equal pass rate for boys and girls. More girls passed than boys, but the placing was 50-50. In other words, there were at least 5% of all girls who were penalised, who didn't get into grammar schools because of the 50-50 rule. And then the other thing that was unfair about it was the fact that it wasn't a test that decided objectively whether you were fit for a grammar school. It was a test on whether there were enough grammar school places for you in your area. So what happened was that one area had more places than another. I was in a place in Harrow, northwest London, that had more places than, say, Norfolk. So were Harrow children brighter than Norfolk children? Were we more deserving of grammar school places? But you could go around the country like that and find variations. So in other words, the same children in one place, the same type of child in one place would pass and in another place would fail. The exam was rigged with unfairnesses, and if we increase it beyond Kent and Buckinghamshire and these other counties that have it, the unfairnesses will develop and increase in their many different ways. I think all ability, and genuinely all ability, comprehensive education works. That what you need is not to have a means by which some children can somehow or other escape the net and go off and be seeded off into specially selected schools. We are a community, we live as one. We don't know who is going to have an ability in one thing and who's going to have an ability in another. The whole point about the 11 plus is it's a very crude stamp on saying you are an A child and that child is a B child. Take me as an example, good at English, rubbish at maths. Let's say I did just squeak through on the maths. Why was I more worthy of a grammar school place than my friend who was pretty good at maths and a bit wobbly on his English? He went to the Sec Mod. Was he less worthy? So this kind of dubbing of people as one kind of person on the basis of a very narrow set of tests, that is ludicrous. We don't know how or why we need the abilities of people who might be not achieving in one area and achieving in another. We never know. You know, this is the argument, of course, that is around disability. It's exactly the same thing. Is somebody in a wheelchair less entitled to be part of our society? No, of course not. So this has taken years to discover, and we're still not there properly in society to see this, but civilization and society needs all our talents, all of them. We never know. It takes years for these to flourish, to blossom, to come into fruition, and we need places where we value all the talents. And so I can appreciate your talent, you can appreciate mine, we can talk to each other and produce good things together. You know, I often think of the analogy, I'm very keen on drama and being in plays. No play can go on if you don't use all the combined talents of everybody. The person who does the lights, the person who does the makeup, the person who does the wardrobe, the person who comes on, says nothing and walks off, the person who gives the great big beautiful speech. These are all crucial talents for that play to work. If the lighting person turns up and the lighting isn't working, well, you haven't got play, have you? And if the wardrobe doesn't turn up and the costumes aren't there, or they're the wrong costumes, well, then the audience will get it wrong. So each one of these talents is crucial. You can't have streamed drama, right? It wouldn't make sense. You say, well, all right, all the wardrobe people and all the lighting people and all the studio mates, you go over there, and then all us actors will go over there. I say us actors because I like acting, and we'll all go over there, and then we'll get the play on. I mean, it's a nonsense. Well, I think of that as the equivalent to my ideal of a comprehensive education. Yes, we get a lot of those of us who went to grammar school. I did go to a grammar school. In fact, I went to two because we moved. Go to grammar school. We're somehow or other accused of not being entitled to speak up for comprehensive education. This is the old argument that, you know, if people are quite well off, they shouldn't argue for socialism. So it's always it's kind of the hypocritical argument that somehow or other you're not entitled to have egalitarian ideas if somehow or other in an unequal society you've done reasonably okay. Well, if that were the rule, well, then we would never progress. If that was the rule, then we'd never have to be any more egalitarian. There'd have to be no reforms, because everyone should just speak up from within their position in society. And so a middle class person like me should just speak up for the middle class and speak up for the very best that can happen to the middle classes. In actual fact, the reason why I speak up for comprehensive education is because I saw the unfairness of the grammar school system. Now, you can see the unfairness from a variety of positions. If you think, there it is, there's the sausage factory going through of the children I was with, aged 8, 9, 10, 11, and then into 12, 13, well, I witnessed it. I could see in my own class how 50% of us in my class were going one way, 50% the other. I could witness that. I could witness the distress, the anxiety, and so on. Now, I was just one side of that, and so I'm looking over the fence and I'm seeing how my best friend is on the other side of the fence, and I'm beginning to think, oh, well, maybe he's going to go to the other school, and I'm sad about that. And he's saying, oh, it'll be all right, and it doesn't matter anyway. And at the same time, the whole of the area, if you like, was bedeviled with this sense that there were these two inferior schools. Now, whether they were or weren't, we'll come to that later if you like, but the point was, that's the way we talked. There were the best schools and the inferior schools. Now, is someone telling me I'm not entitled to talk about that? Well, of course I am. I witnessed it, I was part of it, I was part of that grading thing where everybody knew who you were better than and who you were worse than. What a horrible way to be in education, constantly physically seeing with your eyes, with every lesson that you're doing, oh, I'm better than her, I'm not as good as her, I'm better than him, I'm not as good as him. Just horrible when I think about it. I feel actually sort of infected by it because, you know, you can't escape it. There were probably times, who knows, where I did think, oh, well, I'm better than her, she can't read very well because, you know, swanky old me thought I was quite good at reading. What a horrible thing to have thought. You know, I'm ashamed of it. Well, from that position, of course you can critique the system. The idea that somehow or other, you know, well, you know, you were lucky, you pull up the drawbridge, and now you're saying other people aren't entitled to a grammar school education. I say, let's have an education that had the good aspects of my grammar school, and believe me, there were some bad ones, and the good aspects of the SecMod, bung it all into the same school, and let's share it about. I mean, on that fact, the technical education in my school was appalling. 1/3 of the science teaching was absolutely terrible. 2/3 of it was great, but 1/3 of it, the teacher never got beyond about 20 minutes of a lesson before everybody was outside the classroom. People think grammar schools were this kind of, you know, huge platonic ideal that somehow we were all sitting, you know, up there in the Acropolis, you know, talking about philosophy. I mean, give me a break here. You know, some of that grammar school education was really bad. All the technical side was really ropey. Meanwhile, over there at the SecMod, it's quite ironic, the one down the road, the technical education people tell me was very good, but something else was going on. They were streaming in that secondary modern school, and the top stream outperformed our lowest performers. In other words, they'd made a mistake at 11, even on their terms, because their top stream, how do I know all this? Because my father was supervising students at that school, and so he visited the school, and the guy said, look, here is my top stream. Luckily, those kids in that then fifth year, the year of O-levels, what would be now the GCSEs, many of them went on into the sixth form and caught up. You know, in a sense, their potential wasn't thwarted. Others, not, because the environment wasn't one in which they could develop their skills. I know people, for example, that basically, though the school did give them a grounding in the technical work, it couldn't take them on any further. And then we did have in those days the technical schools, where some people went 14 or 15 and then went across to the technical schools. Well, in the present environment, we've mostly lost those. We've lost high quality technical education. I would say, as an absolute basic minimum of a true comprehensive system, is that you would want to make of equal status technical, scientific, artistic and humanistic education. You know, these four vital planks of how we are and how we operate. So technology, science, what you might call generally the humanities, history, geography, philosophy, that sort of thing, and then the creative arts, the dancing, the singing, the music making, the film making or whatever, and we put those on an equal level. We need all that. We don't need some of it, and some of it isn't more important than others, and the best way to do that is within a single institution, and the school to give that signal every day of the week, to celebrate and praise the school students who've done a dance, who've made a rocket, who can talk about philosophy and so on. We want to give those all equal status. And education is bedeviled by this ranking of types of education, and ranking, selecting, segregating. And all it does is hold people back. We know it. We know it holds people back. It prevents people from fulfilling the potential, and it prevents society from benefiting from that.